3 months ago, my own son threw me out of my house. Yesterday, he was standing on my front porch, begging me to open the door. But before I tell you why, you need to know how a father loses everything without ever stopping loving his child. My name is Michael Harrison. I'm 68 years old. For 40 years, I worked as a high school history teacher in Ohio. I wasn't rich. I never owned a fancy car. I never took expensive vacations. But I gave my family everything I had. Every extra dollar. Every overtime shift. Every birthday I worked instead of celebrating was for one person. My son, Daniel. The day he was born, I held him in my arms and made myself one promise. No matter what happens, this boy will always have a better life than I did. For 35 years, I kept that promise. When he wanted a bicycle, I bought it. When he wanted to go to college, I worked evenings tutoring students to pay his tuition. When he wanted to start a business, I emptied my retirement savings. People called me foolish. I called it being a father. Then, my wife Sarah passed away. Cancer. 38 years of marriage. Gone in less than 8 months. The house suddenly became too quiet. Every room reminded me of her. Every morning, I still made 2 cups of coffee. Before remembering, she wasn't there anymore. Daniel noticed I was struggling. One evening, he came over with his wife. "Dad, you shouldn't be living alone. We want you to move in with us." I looked at him, and for the first time since Sarah died, I felt hope. Maybe I wasn't as alone as I thought. So, I sold my house. The house where Daniel took his first steps. The house where Sarah planted roses every spring. The house I'd spent 40 years paying for. I sold it. Not because I wanted to. Because I trusted my son. I gave him every dollar from the sale, so he could buy a larger home with an extra bedroom for me. He hugged me. "Thank you, Dad. I promise. You'll never regret this." I believed him. 3 weeks later, I moved into their beautiful new home. At first, everything felt perfect. My grandson hugged me every morning. Daniel smiled. His wife, Emily, seemed kind. For the first time in months, I laughed again. I honestly believed the hardest chapter of my life was finally over. I couldn't have been more wrong. The first few weeks felt almost perfect. Every morning, my 6-year-old grandson, Liam, would run into my room before school. "Grandpa, wake up." He'd jump onto my bed, and we'd eat pancakes together before everyone else woke up. Those little moments kept me alive. For the first time since Sarah passed away, I wasn't eating dinner alone. I wasn't talking to empty rooms. I finally felt like I belonged somewhere again. But slowly, things began to change. At first, they were tiny things. Emily stopped asking me to join them for dinner. Instead, she'd leave a plate in the microwave. "Dinner's in there. We already ate." I told myself she was probably just busy. Then one afternoon, I overheard something I wish I'd never heard. Emily was talking to Daniel in the kitchen. "I didn't sign up to live with your father forever." Daniel sighed. "He's been through a lot." Emily crossed her arms. "So have I. I feel like I can't even relax in my own house anymore." I quietly walked back to my room, pretending I'd heard nothing. That night, I couldn't sleep. For the first time, I felt like a guest. Not family, just someone taking up space. Over the next month, little things kept disappearing. They stopped inviting me on family outings. Movie nights happened without me. Pizza arrived, but nobody asked if I wanted any. One evening, I found them laughing together in the backyard. Liam spotted me through the window. He waved excitedly. "Grandpa," before he could run toward me. Emily gently stopped him. "Leave Grandpa alone. He's probably tired." I wasn't tired. I was lonely. The next morning, I made breakfast for everyone. Pancakes, just like Sarah used to make. I thought, maybe we'd eat together. Maybe things would feel normal again. Daniel walked into the kitchen. He looked at the table, then at me. "Dad, you really don't have to do all this." I smiled. I wanted to. He nodded politely, but nobody sat down. Emily grabbed a protein shake. Liam ate cereal. Daniel took a coffee to go. Within 5 minutes, the kitchen was empty. I stood there alone, staring at 4 untouched pancakes. For some reason, that hurt more than I expected. A week later, I accidentally dropped one of my old photo albums in the living room. Pictures of Sarah, Daniel as a little boy, our family vacations, our Christmas mornings. Liam sat beside me. "Who's that?" He pointed at a young woman smiling in one of the pictures. That's Grandma Sarah. She was the kindest person I've ever known. Liam smiled. I wish I could have met her. Before I could answer, Emily walked in. She picked up the album, placed it back in the box, and quietly said, Liam, go upstairs. After he left, she looked straight at me. We need to talk. The expression on her face told me my life was about to change forever. Emily waited until Liam had gone upstairs. Then she slowly sat across from me. For a few seconds, she didn't say a word. She simply looked at the table. Finally, she took a deep breath. Michael, we need to talk. I forced a smile. Of course. What's on your mind? She hesitated, then quietly said, I don't think this arrangement is working anymore. I frowned. I'm sorry. She folded her hands together. I think it's time for you to find another place to live. For a moment, I honestly thought I'd heard her wrong. I looked toward Daniel. He had just walked into the kitchen. He heard every word, but he didn't say anything. I waited for him to smile, to tell Emily she was being unreasonable. Instead, he lowered his eyes. My heart began to sink. Daniel, I whispered. He slowly pulled out a chair and sat down. Dad, this isn't easy, but Emily has a point. The room suddenly felt colder. I stared at my own son, the little boy I'd carried on my shoulders, the boy whose nightmares I'd chased away, the young man whose college tuition I'd paid by emptying my retirement account. He couldn't even look me in the eyes. I swallowed hard. So, you're asking me to leave? Daniel rubbed his forehead. It's only temporary. We just need our own space. Emily quickly added, You'll understand. I nodded slowly. No, I understand perfectly. Silence filled the room. Then I asked the one question I wasn't sure I wanted answered. Where am I supposed to go? Neither of them answered. That silence hurt more than any words ever could. I stood up, walked quietly to my room, closed the door. Then, for the first time since Sarah's funeral, I cried. Not because I was losing a house, because I realized I had already lost my family. An hour later, I carried one small suitcase into the living room. 40 years of memories, reduced to a few shirts, some old photographs, and Sarah's wedding ring. Liam came running downstairs. Grandpa, why do you have your suitcase? I knelt beside him. I'm going on a little trip, buddy. He smiled. When are you coming back? Before I could answer, Emily gently called him away. Liam, come here. He looked confused. But I want Grandpa. Emily took his hand. We'll see Grandpa another time. Liam broke free and hugged me tightly. I love you, Grandpa. My voice almost disappeared. I love you too, buddy. More than you'll ever know. As I walked toward the front door, I turned around one last time. Daniel was still standing in the kitchen. He finally looked up. Our eyes met. I kept waiting, hoping he'd stop me, hoping he'd say, Dad, don't go. But he never did. He simply stood there and watched me walk out of the house that I had paid for. The front door closed behind me. And just like that, I became homeless without realizing it. My son had just thrown away the only person who would have given his life for him. The first night, I slept inside my car, not because I couldn't afford a hotel, but because I couldn't bring myself to spend the money Sarah and I had saved together. I parked beside a quiet lake, reclined the driver's seat, and stared at the ceiling until sunrise. I kept asking myself the same question. Where did I fail as a father? Had I spoiled Daniel too much? Had I loved him too much? Or had I simply expected too little from him? The next morning, I rented the smallest apartment I could find. One bedroom, old furniture, peeling paint. The landlord apologized as he handed me the keys. I'm sorry it isn't much. I smiled. Don't worry. I've lived in a house full of people and still felt alone. This place already feels warmer. He looked at me, but said nothing. The apartment was almost empty. Just a bed, a tiny kitchen, and one window overlooking an old park. I unpacked my suitcase. Sarah's wedding ring, our family photo album, a few clothes, 40 years of memories, fit inside one small closet. That evening, I made myself a simple dinner, grilled cheese and tomato soup. Exactly what Sarah used to make whenever life felt difficult. I placed 2 bowls on the table, out of habit. Then I quietly put one back in the cabinet. Some habits never leave you. A few days later, I found a part-time job at the local library. The pay wasn't great, but I didn't need much anymore. Every afternoon, I'd help children find books, read stories during reading hour, and organize old shelves. The kids reminded me of Liam. Whenever one of them smiled, my heart hurt a little less. One Friday afternoon, I was putting books back on a shelf when my phone vibrated. For a split second, my heart jumped. Maybe Daniel had changed his mind. Maybe he was calling to apologize. I looked at the screen. It wasn't Daniel. It was my bank. My account had been completely emptied. Every single dollar, from the money left after selling my house, was gone. I stared at the screen, unable to breathe. There had to be some mistake. I immediately called the bank. After verifying my identity, the woman on the phone spoke softly. "Mr. Harrison, the funds were transferred 3 days ago." My heart began pounding. Transferred? To who? There was a long pause. Then she answered. To a joint account, owned by Daniel Harrison. The phone nearly slipped from my hand. I stood there, surrounded by children's books, feeling like the ground had disappeared beneath my feet. Losing my home had broken my heart, but realizing my own son had taken every dollar I had left, shattered what little was still holding me together. For the first time in my life, I truly had nothing. I didn't call Daniel. I didn't drive to his house. I didn't even send him a message. Because deep down, I already knew the truth. If someone can watch their own father leave with one suitcase, they've already made their decision. So I went back to work. Every morning, I'd unlock the library doors, help children find books, smile, even when my heart was breaking. Life became painfully simple. Wake up, work, come home, sleep, repeat. Then one Tuesday afternoon, everything changed. A black SUV pulled in the library parking lot. 2 people stepped out, a woman in a gray business suit, and an older man carrying a leather briefcase. They walked straight toward me. "Mr. Michael Harrison?" I nodded. "I'm Rebecca Collins. I'm an attorney." My first thought was simple. Daniel. Maybe he'd finally realized what he'd done. Maybe he wanted to apologize. Rebecca reached in her briefcase. "I'm sorry to bother you during work, but I need 5 minutes of your time." We sat at a small table in the library cafe. She placed a thick folder in front of me. "I've been trying to locate you for almost 3 months. I frowned. "Me?" She smiled politely. "Yes. There was a problem finding your current address." My heart began racing. "What is this about?" She slid one document across the table. "Do you remember a man named Robert Whitmore?" The name instantly sounded familiar. Robert Whitmore had been one of my students. Almost 30 years ago, he wasn't the smartest kid in class, but he worked harder than anyone I'd ever taught. I smiled. "Of course I remember Robert. He was a good young man." Rebecca smiled. "He spoke about you almost every day." I laughed softly. "I haven't seen him in decades." Her smile slowly disappeared. "I'm afraid you never will." My heart sank. "What happened?" Rebecca lowered her eyes. "Mr. Whitmore passed away 6 months ago." Silence. He had no wife, no children, no surviving parents. She opened the folder again. Before he passed, he left very specific instructions. She looked directly into my eyes. He wanted everything he owned to go to the teacher who changed his life. I stared at her. "I'm sorry. I think you've mistaken me for someone else." She gently shook her head. "No, Mr. Harrison. I'm talking about you." I couldn't speak. She continued. "Robert built one of the largest construction companies in Illinois. The company, his investments, his real estate, everything." She paused. "The total estate is currently valued at..." She looked down at the papers. $284 million. I honestly thought she'd said thousand. Then I saw the number myself. $284 million. My hands started shaking. "There has to be a mistake." Rebecca smiled. "There isn't. He left you a handwritten letter." She carefully placed an old envelope in front of me. On the front, written in Robert's own handwriting, were 7 simple words. "For the teacher, who never gave up on me." I stared at Robert's letter for almost a full minute before I finally opened it. Inside was only one page. It read, "Dear Mr. Harrison, you probably don't remember every student you've ever taught, but I remember every word you ever said to me. When everyone else called me a failure, you were the only person who believed I could become something. You paid for my first college application. You stayed after school every Friday just to help me with math. When my father died, you sat beside me at his funeral. You once told me, success means nothing if you forget the people who helped you get there. I never forgot. Everything I built started inside your classroom. You gave me a future. Now let me give you peace. Thank you for saving a boy who had almost given up. I couldn't stop crying. I had completely forgotten helping Robert. To me, I was simply doing my job. To him, I had changed his life forever. Over the next few weeks, everything changed. The legal process was completed. I didn't buy sports cars. I didn't buy a private jet. Instead, I bought a quiet little home beside the lake Sarah always loved. Then I donated millions to schools, libraries, and scholarships for children who couldn't afford college. Because that's exactly what Sarah would have wanted. 3 months passed. Life became peaceful again. Then one rainy afternoon, someone knocked on my front door. Knock, knock, knock. I opened it. Standing there was Daniel. He looked exhausted. His expensive suit was gone. His eyes were red. Behind him stood Emily, holding Liam's hand. For a few seconds, nobody spoke. Finally, Daniel lowered his head. Dad, I know I don't deserve this, but can we talk? I quietly stepped outside, closing the door behind me. I heard your company went bankrupt. He looked shocked. You know, I nodded. I also heard the bank took your house. Tears filled his eyes. We lost everything. Emily began crying. It was my fault. I pushed you away. I thought money was all that mattered. I was wrong. Daniel couldn't even look at me. Dad, I sold your house. I spent your money. I chose my comfort instead of my own father. He broke down crying. I'm so sorry. I'd give anything to undo it. For a long moment, I simply looked at him. This wasn't the successful businessman I'd raised. This was a broken little boy who had finally realized what he'd lost. Then Liam ran toward me. He hugged my legs tightly. I missed you, Grandpa. I told Mommy and Daddy. They were wrong. That little hug melted every bit of anger I still carried. I looked at Daniel. I forgave you the day I walked out of your house. His head slowly lifted. But forgiveness doesn't erase consequences. He nodded. I know. I'm not asking for money. I'm asking for another chance. I smiled. The money isn't important. The house isn't important. What matters is whether you finally learned what family means. Daniel nodded through tears. I have. I opened my front door. Then come inside. But understand this. You're entering my home, not because you need a place to live, but because you're my son. That afternoon, we sat together for hours, not talking about money, not talking about business, only about family, about Sarah, about mistakes, about second chances. As the sun disappeared over the lake, Liam climbed into my lap. Dad, Daniel suddenly whispered, I spent my whole life thinking I inherited your money. But today, I realized the greatest thing you ever gave me was your heart. I smiled, because after everything we'd been through, my son had finally become the man I'd always hoped he would be. Sometimes, life doesn't punish people immediately. Sometimes, it simply waits until they're ready to understand the lesson. And sometimes, the greatest inheritance isn't money, it's forgiveness.